Welcome back to Wide Angle. You, Rakesh, were talking about the size, the relative size of the two. The Americans are going to leave behind 10,000, and now the size of the Afghan troops is, but is it really 350,000? Is that, Bhadran, your understanding?
No, I think I'd like to go back a little bit. You know, the point is, what we know, that the Americans will never agree the Afghans to control their operations in Afghanistan is something which I'm very sure Karzai is intelligent enough and savvy enough to know. So when he brought that up as a condition, there is politics in it. We have to understand that. Now, this is why I said that all these candidates have taken a certain public position. But then when you bring in a precondition, knowing fully well that is not going to be acceptable to the Americans, and even now civilian casualties are taking place almost practically every week, then we know that there is politics in it. So the question is not really the size of the American presence or anything like that. The question is, if you look at the pact, Karzai's office has put it on the website, the text of it. If you look at it, it is basically establishment of military bases in Afghanistan. So it's not the number which matters. It is a perception that, as you put it, there is an open-ended occupation of their country. Will the Kandahari Pashtun accept it? Now, if you look at then when you come to the candidacies, what you find the coalition building taking place is around the Kandahari Pashtun tribes. You know, Rasul, who was aide to Zahir Shah, Naim, who withdrew day before yesterday, is a grandson of Zahir Shah, and then Qayyum Karzai, president's brother, stepping down, also from Kandahar. And they have a coalition which is including the brother of Ahmad Shah Massoud as the vice presidential candidate, a protege of a Hazara Shia representative, protege of Karim Khalili, all nationalists.
Therefore, what you're saying is you have the Hazaras and the Shias covered, you have the Panjsheris covered, you have the Northern Alliance more or less
Saeed, there is a little more to this. Recently, Karzai also brought in Kanuni as a vice president. Now, if you remember, after the assassination of Ahmad Shah Massoud, it was Kanuni who was deputed by the Northern Alliance to lead the delegation to Rome to invite Zahir Shah to head the government in exile, and Americans didn't want it. They scotched it, that plan. So, you know, you have here a coalition which is comprising people who have a track record of being nationalists.
Is that your understanding, that the Americans quashed the plan of bringing Zahir Shah back? I thought the Americans were very enthusiastic about making him Baba-i-Millat,
which they did. But I think that eventually what had happened was that Zahir Shah at that stage had been out since 1973. And political structures within Afghanistan had undergone a change. The idea that
after Dawood's assassination,
of course,
and the coming of the communist parties,
and also there had been a shift in the sense that with the Khalq and Parcham factions of the PDPA, you know, during the communist period, you had seen a shift of power away from the Barakzais towards
and the Parcham, for your audience, means a little bit like the CPM and CPI in India.
But the point was that within the Pashtun community, which is the single largest ethnic group in Afghanistan, the power had started shifting from Barakzais to Ghilzais. And so in that sense, a restructuring of power had taken place. Then, of course, you had the Northern Alliance, the Tajiks, Uzbeks and Hazaras, who had come together and had formed a strong fighting military political force. So I suppose for Zahir Shah to have come back in such a changed environment was difficult, and that is why the kind of compromises that were struck.
That in any case is history, but that is history, but important piece of history. The point that Rakesh made just now, that when the Saur revolution took place, I mean that too is history, but I think it's pertinent here. When it took place, something historic happened in Afghanistan. For the first time in 200 years, Durranis were replaced by Ghilzais. Now, this was the trend when in Bonn you produced Hamid Karzai, who being a Popuzai also happens to be a Durrani. And therefore, is there a tussle? Now, Mullah Umar and this tribe, they are all Ghilzais. The Taliban are all Ghilzais. Is there not this tussle between this intra-Pashtun tussle inside Afghanistan? Is there or is there not?
No, Saeed, I don't know much about it, but I don't think it is that relevant, and I don't think that is the politics that Karzai is playing at the moment, because you see, he is a very astute observer of geopolitics. And now even American analysts acknowledge, coming back to the Afghan armed forces, that they have held the ground rather well through the past 2 years, and they haven't lost ground to the Taliban. They have taken casualties, but they have kept up the morale. And in fact, Brookings Institution's last report last week, it says that the security situation now is palpably better than in 2011 and 12. Now that the Afghan armed forces are in control.
Yes.
So Karzai is proven right in a way that they have staying power. That's one thing.
Yes.
Regional environment is working in his favor. And American presence is a controversial thing, for all of them. So I think, the premises on which, his politics was built up, his coalition politics, I think they stand more or less vindicated today.
Sir Rakesh, as a journalist, I am always suspicious about the sources of information. How do we know what we know? Time was when every Western journalist was in Kabul, and he gave us some flavor of what was happening either at Bagran or in Helmand or wherever, and they got briefed and debriefed by the British and various ISAF and the NATO elements there, and we had some idea. Suddenly we find they've packed up their bags and they're gone. When they left, the last story that was being reported by them was green on blue, that the Afghans were turning upon their American compatriots and shooting them for all the accumulated anger. Suddenly you found that the journalists went away. And just because the cameras have been switched off, have the incidents not taken place?
Well, one reason is that you have less number of Americans. So obviously the number of incidents of green on blue will come down. That is why I emphasize the relative strength, which is important. And therefore, when you had a larger number of Americans compared to a relatively smaller numbers in the Afghan security forces,
how many are there? We'll come back to the number of American troops and the subsequent story after a short break. We shall come back to the Afghan elections. Once the dust settles on our own elections in this country, all of us, you and I and Badran, we shall be decoding what has happened in Afghanistan, because it is of great importance to India, to the region, and in fact it would be interesting to touch quickly China, Iran, Pakistan and us. Rakesh, why don't you feel that one, because time is running out.
Thank you. Well, I think one thing is clear, that all the neighbors would like a degree of stability in Afghanistan because it has a direct impact on them. We in India, we have always maintained that the vision of Afghanistan that we have is one of a country which is secure, which is independent, and which allows all its ethnic groups to live together and is on the path of development, and as President Karzai often says, recovers its role of the crossroads of trade between South Asia and Central Asia and West Asia.
Right.
Now, when we look at the neighbors, I think we find that we can very quickly see which are the neighbors who would like Afghanistan to have that kind of a strong independent role, and which are the ones who would like Afghanistan to be part of its strategic depth. I think Iran would like Afghanistan to have a strong independent presence.
But they don't want a single American soldier there.
Well,
that's their dream scenario.
Yes, but the Iranians, let's not forget, in recent months have opened up and have moved forward in their dialogue with the Americans on a very, very critical issue, namely the nuclear issue.
Right. China. China is very worried because of its Xinjiang
Absolutely.
problems.
And I think we have seen
Yes.
that the Chinese have on more than one occasion conveyed their concerns both to the Afghan government and more discreetly also to the Pakistani government.
Yes. One final question, Bhadran, that this dialogue with the Taliban involved. Quickly, what happened in Qatar when the Taliban showed up with the Islamic Republic of Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan flag? Who was involved? Pakistan was involved. The Americans were involved, and Karzai just vamoosed. He said, "Look, this is not what I wanted." What is going on? Has there been any progress? 2 minutes left. You are the master.
No, I'll answer it in 2 seconds. The point is Afghans didn't feel that they were controlling the process. Period.
Yeah. And the process is being controlled by?
Americans and Pakistanis.
No, but one more thing. The Americans also backed off from the process, because I think even the Americans felt that this flag and all, many of the aspects of that was something which they had not agreed upon. And which is why there has been the stepping back from the Doha process.
There's so many wheels within wheels, because don't forget that Qatar and Doha is the poor cousin of the Saudis. I mean, when the Saudis and they began to, when the Saudis found that the Qataris were playing a role, were hitting above their weight, were punching above their weight, they said, no, now you better get off the high horse. I think that also played a little role. Meanwhile, so elections, law and order in control, we are going to set very low bars. Is there going to be all the groups who were going to monitor these elections have picked up their marbles and they have left? What does that indicate?
I think the EU is still there, but some of the groups after the recent attack at Serena Hotel have packed up.
Is that the reason? Or does that not leave open the chance? Anyway, there is so much, there is no end to this discussion, and maybe on another occasion, Bhadran, we haven't had your insights on this one. The debate has to continue. On that note, thank you very much. We will resume another day on another issue to be taken up under the auspices of Wide Angle.